Okay. I let him run on, this paper mache Mephistopheles, and it seemed to me that if I tried, I could poke my forefinger through him, and would find nothing inside but a little loose dirt, maybe. He, don't you see, had been planning to be assistant manager by and by, under the present man, and I could see that the coming of that Kurtz had upset them both not a little. He talked precipitately, and I did not try to stop him. I had my shoulders against the wreck of my steamer, hauled up on the slope like a carcass of some big river animal. The smell of mud, of primeval mud, by Jove, was in my nostrils, and high stillness of primeval forest was before my eyes. There were shiny patches on the black creek. The moon had spread over everything a thin layer of silver, over the rank grass, over the mud. Upon the wall of matted vegetation, standing higher than the wall of a temple, over the great river, I could see through a sombre gap glittering as if flowed broadly by without a murmur. All this was great, expectant, mute, while the man jabbered about himself. I wondered whether the stillness on the face of the immensity looking at us, too, were meant as an appeal or as a menace. What were we who had strayed in here? Could we handle that dumb thing, or would it handle us? I felt how big, how confoundedly big, was that thing that couldn't talk, and perhaps was deaf as well. What was in there? I could see a little ivory coming out from there, and I had heard Mr. Kurtz was in there. I had heard enough about it too, God knows, yet somehow it didn't bring any image with it, no more than if I had been told an angel or a fiend was in there. Right, let's just pause for a second. A lot happens in this passage, and you see very protracted sentences, phrases being put together, okay? And this is again replicating that modernist style of writing that we've got. Right? For starters, if we go back to how it kicked off, when he's talking about the brickmaker here and labelling him a paper mache Mephistopheles, he's doing two things. He's implying a sinister side to his personality, so there's some bit of evil there. But the paper mache part of it is hollow. Right? It's a reference that he turns around and makes about the manager as well. So he's talking about the fact that these people have nothing on the inside. All right? And that, in part, is the reason why they behave so coldly and so cruelly. If you then look at the next bit that we get there, you see the tone that he's actually creating, that Conrad is creating via Marlowe's description. So, for starters, I had my shoulders against the wreck of my steamer, hauled up like a carcass of some big river animal. Okay, so the imagery there, right? You make a note, right? It sets a gloomy tone, right? Well, yeah, it is primordial, but you've also got this part of it here. He uses this word repeatedly. Okay, he's talking about the mud. He's talking about the forest. He's talking about the black creek. He's talking about the fact that the moon is hanging over everything like a thin layer of silver. All right, over the rank grass, so the grass that smells, over the mud, upon the wall of matted vegetation. So this phrase goes on and on. If you have a look, it starts here, down the bottom of 128. The phrase kicks off, the moon had spread over everything. And that phrase doesn't actually end for quite a while. So it's a very long phrase with lots of different bits of imagery that we get in there, right? And it sets that gloomy tone. And then you get an even more specific set of imagery with regards to the forest itself, with regards to the Congo. So the stillness on the face of the immensity looking at us, right? Slight function of personification there. Right? Looking at the actual jungle as some sort of beast. And then you get all these questions. The fact that it's a dumb thing is referring to the fact that it can't speak, it couldn't talk. That's what it's talking about a little bit later, right? And perhaps it was deaf as well. So it wouldn't hear their cries, it will not offer anything up to them. right? You can't give anything to this forest, and you're not going to get anything from it either, right? It is just that darkness that he's talking about. All right, if we keep going. I believed it in the same way one of you might believe that there are inhabitants in the planet Mars. I knew once a Scotch sailmaker who was certain, dead sure, there were people in Mars. If you asked him for some idea how they looked and behaved, he would get shy and mutter something about walking on all fours. If you as much as smiled, he would, though a man of 60, offer to fight you. I would not have gone so far as to fight for Kurtz, but I went for him near enough to a lie. You know I hate, detest, and can't bear a lie, not because I am straighter than the rest of us, but simply because it appalls me. There is a taint of death, a flavour of mortality in lies, which is exactly why I hate and detest it in the world. What I want to forget. It makes me miserable and sick, like biting something rotten would do. Temperament, I suppose. Well, I went near enough to it by letting the young fool there believe anything he liked to imagine as to my influence in Europe. I became in an instant as much of a pretense as the rest of the bewitched pilgrims. Okay? This part here is him switching back to his reality, which is having a conversation with the brickmaker. Right? So he's detached himself from that conversation for this entire passage and has been thinking, and all of a sudden he's coming back to what he's actually been talking about. Right? And the fact that he's able to turn around and lie just like they have. So he's been lying about how much influence he has. This simply because I had a notion in it somehow would be of help to that Kurtz, whom at the time I did not see, you understand. He was just a word for me. I do not see the man in the name any more than you do. Do you see him? Do you see the story? Do you see anything? It seems to me I am trying to tell you a dream, making a vain attempt, because no relation of a dream can convey the dream sensation, that commingling of absurdity, surprise, and bewilderment in a tremor of struggling revolt, that notion of being captured by the incredible, which is of the very essence of dreams. All right? So not only has he switched out of a memory back to his reality there, talking to the brickmaker, but then he actually starts referencing people on the Nelly. Do you see anything? Do you? Right? This is him actually moving another layer out of this framed narrative back to the people that he's talking to on the Nelly so many years later while they sit on the Thames. Essentially, he's just in awe of the situation that he's found himself in, right? But you've got a lot of things going on in that one little passage. You've got references to what's happened to some of these other Europeans that have come there, and what's their purpose, what type of personality they have. So that's all of the stuff about the paper mache Mephistopheles. Then you've got more imagery that Conrad has included with regards to how immense this forest is, what that means for Marlowe, what he's trying to walk into. All right? And then you've got the issues that Marlowe is trying to get across. He's looking at these people who he's talking to on the Nelly, and they can't understand what he's talking about. So he's got a whole heap of different issues that he's trying to get through, and that's all in one passage.